There is a bakery in the middle of the Australian desert that only opens for 2 months a year, and it is buried underground. Underground because 150 years ago it was the only way to keep meat from cooking in its own skin out there. Above it, stone walls stand with no roofs left to hold up. Doorways open onto nothing. And for 600 kilometres in every direction, there is almost no one left to walk through them. This is Farina. It sits on a gibber plain in the far north of South Australia, roughly 600 kilometres from Adelaide, out where the Flinders Ranges give way to the edge of the Lake Eyre Basin. From the air, it looks like scattered stone teeth pushed up out of red dirt, the last visible remains of a town that was supposed to feed a nation. Today, across an area of land larger than some small countries, the population sits at around 15 people. But here is what almost nobody knows about Farina. This was not a mining camp that got unlucky, and it was not a settlement wiped out by drought alone. Farina was founded on a theory, a real, taken seriously by the government, printed in official reports theory that farming itself could change the weather. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a nation convinced itself the desert could be talked into raining, and what it cost the people who believed it. In the 1870s, this stretch of country was known as Government Gums, a name for a government well dug next to a scrubby patch of eucalyptus trees. There was nothing here worth building a town around, except one very expensive idea. Colonial surveyors and agricultural officials had convinced themselves that rain follows the plow, that breaking soil and planting crops would somehow summon more rainfall to a region that received almost none. It should have been an easy theory to dismiss. Instead, a run of unusually wet years right before the surveyors arrived made it look like proof. In 1878, the town was officially proclaimed and given a new name: Farina. Latin for flour, a prediction about what it would become. For a while, the prediction almost looked true. By the 1890s, Farina had grown to around 600 people. 2 hotels stood on the main street. 2 breweries operated at the same time in a town this size, which tells you something about how thirsty outback life makes a person. There was a general store, a post office, a police station, and yes, a brothel, because a boom town in the middle of nowhere still needs somewhere for men to spend a wage before it burns a hole in their pocket. Silver and copper mines nearby pulled in workers from across the world. Chinese labourers, German settlers, other Europeans, all funneled into a town built on gibberstone in the driest part of a very dry state. And running alongside all of them were camel trains driven by Afghan camelers, the men who had been moving goods across this country long before any railway existed to do it for them. The railway arrived in 1882, and for a moment it made Farina genuinely important. It became the end of the line, the last stop before goods had to travel the rest of the way by camel or by cart. Everything bound for remote cattle stations, all the way out to southeast Queensland, passed through here first. Construction kept pushing north for decades, eventually reaching Alice Springs in 1929, and Farina became the exact point where the rail gauge itself switched from narrow to standard. For a short window in history, a dot on the map that most Australians still cannot find, controlled how supplies moved across half a continent. The rain never followed the plow. It was never going to. What followed instead were droughts, long ones, and dust storms that stripped whatever thin topsoil the wheat crops had managed to hold on to. The mines, which had been propping up the local economy while the farms failed quietly in the background, closed in 1927. By then, the theory that founded the town had already been dead for years. Nobody had simply been willing to say it out loud yet. A town like Farina does not die all at once. It dies in small, specific closures that nobody marks on a calendar until decades later when someone adds them up. The school shut in 1957. The post office closed in 1960, the same year the cemetery held its final burial. The general store held on until 1967, the last shopkeeper likely turning the sign around for the final time without any sense of occasion. And in 1980, the railway line was rerouted further west, taking with it the last practical reason for anyone to stay. Out at Farina's cemetery, a short drive from the ruins, there is a section locals call the Afghan Corner. Headstones there carry English and Arabic script side by side. A few carry no names at all, only the shape of a grave. Every one of them faces Mecca. These are the resting places of the camelers who kept this town connected to the rest of the country before the railway made their work obsolete, and then were left here, in the ground, long after the town that needed them stopped needing anyone at all. If this is the Australia nobody put in the brochure, but you wish they had, hit subscribe. There are dozens more places like this waiting. Here is what almost nobody expects. Farina did not stay empty forever. In 2008, a group of volunteer carpenters, stonemasons and builders formed the Farina Restoration Group and started returning every year to hold the town together, stone by stone. 9 buildings, including former hotels, the old post office, and the police station, have had work done on them since. And for 35 years, 2 people called this ghost town home. Anne and Kevin Dawes found Farina in the 1980s with little more than crumbling walls and a water tank left standing, and instead of driving past like everyone else, they stayed. They built a campground out of nothing because tourists kept arriving anyway and needed somewhere to be. They turned that old underground meat store, built in the 1800s to keep food from spoiling in the heat, into a working bakery that now opens for 2 months every year and funds the town's slow restoration. In 2026, after 35 years, Anne and Kevin packed up and left Farina for good. The town that was abandoned once by wheat farmers and abandoned again by the railway has now, quietly, been abandoned a 3rd time by the 2 people who refused to let it disappear completely. Farina was never really a story about wheat or rain or even a railway line. It was a story about how far a government and the people who trusted it were willing to go on an idea that was never tested before it was built into a town. Farina failed at everything it was designed to do, and it is still standing because somebody always shows up to keep a dead place breathing a little longer. That is not really a story about one gibber plane in the far north of South Australia. That is the story of half this country. Australia is bigger than the map they gave you. Subscribe and we will show you the rest of it.